Mr. President, I'd like to start today by reading a letter that I received this week. So many of us here in the Senate are operating with furloughed staff, and we're doing our best to read and respond to the letters we're getting from home, the calls that are coming into our offices, and this one touched me in particular. My name, it began, is Master Sergeant Corey P. DeLuzio. I am an Air Reserve Technician at Dover Air Force Base in Dover, Delaware. I have served this great nation for 12 years without question or reservation. Every time I've been called upon, I've answered the call, left my family behind, and served proudly as a maintainer for C-17 aircraft. I know you understand the reach and the mission requirements for such an aircraft, and I tell you this not for a thank you or any type of acknowledgement. I tell you this, Master Sergeant DeLuzio writes, because I am also a husband to a woman who has stood by my side in support of every deployment. I tell you this because I'm the father of a 3-year-old boy who doesn't even question when the answer is, Daddy's at work. I understand a man in your position has made sacrifices as well. However, today, I had to tell my family I am unable to work. Not because of anything I have control of, but because of decisions made by individuals who will not miss a paycheck, individuals who will always know when the next check is coming. I write this understanding that it will fall on deaf ears. And I'm usually one that remains quiet and follows orders for those appointed above me. However, enough is enough. Please do your part in resolving this issue so I can simply get back to serving my country and my family. Sincerely yours, Master Sergeant Corey DeLuzio. Mr. President, it pains me that the Master Sergeant thought his letter would fall on deaf ears, that no one here, that neither I nor any of my colleagues would hear or care about the concerns of a man, his wife, his family, who has served this country and who stands ready to continue serving this country, but whose family is being harmed by the mindless, purposeless shutdown of the government that is now in day 9. This first government shutdown in 17 years, and by all indications, one that will continue into another week. Mr. President, I start today by saying to Master Sergeant DeLuzio, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the needless pain and difficulty that this shutdown is imposing on your family and so many other families across this country. Roughly 800,000 federal employees have been furloughed at different times in the last 9 days, and while some may be returning to active service, they will be getting IOUs rather than regular paychecks. And all over this country, private contractors, as we've heard from other colleagues today, are also laying people off because they can't get the permits or the work permission or the site access. They need to move forward. This shutdown is continuing to harm our country, our reputation, our economy, our families. It is a needless, manufactured, self-imposed wound. I wrestle with this, Mr. President, because we are facing twin manufactured crises, as Senator Reid of Rhode Island just finished saying, hobbled government due to this shutdown on the one hand and the steadily increasing risk of default on the other, these twin manufactured crises seeking some purpose that is unclear from day to day. When it started, this government shutdown seemed to be aimed at what? Repealing the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare, and then a day later seemed to be aimed at delaying the Affordable Care Act, and then when that clearly was unsuccessful, it seemed to be aimed at seeking some partial repeal of the Affordable Care Act, and now it is an ongoing crisis in search of a purpose. The menu of potential demands is growing, and the impact on our families and our communities is growing as well. The House has been wasting its time on mini micro appropriation bills in an attempt to give reporters and folks back home the sense they're actually doing something when it's just misdirection. They think all the activity will keep the American people from noticing that Speaker Boehner isn't bringing up the one bill that could reopen this government in a matter of minutes. A so-called clean continuing resolution, a simple extension of current spending levels. Now, I know to all who watch Master Sergeant DeLuzio and many, many others, we sometimes speak in language that's opaque, that's difficult to understand. We talk about sequester and continuing resolutions and so forth. So I'm going to try and work through these issues in a way that is accessible and direct. Let's be clear, this government is shut down right now because the House wouldn't pass a 6-week extension, an extension to November 15 of what's required to keep us open. Today, that would be just over 4 weeks. We're literally fighting over a 4-week funding bill. How absurd is it that all of this is over a measure that would only have funded the government in the first case for another 4 weeks from now? There's frankly nothing about this situation that isn't absurd. Every day, the House Republicans show up with a new strategy, a new press conference, a new message, and as I said, all the while not really explaining exactly why the government is shut down. Initially, it was shut down to prevent the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, but that's moving forward, as it was always going to be, because it's an enacted program. So what's the current message from the House? They say they're the only ones ready to negotiate, that they're alone at the table, sitting there with jackets off and their bright starched white shirts, waiting for Senate Democrats to meet them at the table and negotiate. Another farce, another fantasy. I'm frankly tired and frustrated with the games that seem to be played here, and I'd like to highlight, if I could, a few of our real efforts to work collaboratively, to answer the question, why won't you negotiate, by saying we have been negotiating. Once the House votes to keep the lights on and to pay our bills, we will continue to negotiate. I have a simple question, Mr. President. Does the House want us to continue to be a closed-door nation, a nation where we have locked out hundreds of thousands of federal workers? And does the House want to threaten that we will become a deadbeat nation, a nation that fails to meet its obligations built up over many administrations and many Congresses, Republican and Democrat? Or are we going to reopen the government and become an open-door nation, and are we going to pay our bills and become a responsible nation as we have been in the past? Well, how did we get here? As a member of the Budget Committee, let me first start, if I could, with the budget resolution. That's how our rules work. We are supposed to begin with a budget resolution that sets the framework for what we're going to spend in the next fiscal year. For the last 3 years that I've been serving here as a senator, over and over on this floor, the call was, why won't the Senate pass a budget? Well, this year, this Senate passed a budget resolution with significant Republican input. Between this floor, where we ultimately passed it, and the committee on which I serve, the Senate adopted more than 40 amendments offered by my Republican colleagues. We compromised. We worked towards a shared goal. Week after week, as I said, Republicans had asked in past years, when is the Senate going to pass a budget? Yet we did. More than 6 months ago, 200 days ago, to be precise, we passed a budget in this Senate. And our chair, Senator Murray of Washington, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, has tried to take our budget to conference with the House budget to do as the rules provide, to reconcile and to responsibly negotiate over our fiscal differences 18 times. She has tried over and over and over to take us to conference and responsibly open formal talks with the House to resolve our fiscal differences. Every time that motion has been blocked, denied, barred by a very small group of Tea Party Republicans in this chamber who have refused to let us go ahead and negotiate as the rules say we should. I also serve, Mr. President, on the Appropriations Committee. Once the budget is framed, once the budget is resolved, we're then supposed to move to appropriations and set our spending bills. As a member of that committee, I've been a part of a process in which we have, in fact, passed 11 spending bills out of committee, 8 of them with bipartisan support. And in order to try and move that process forward, months after the budget was passed, we brought the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Bill to this floor. It passed out of committee by a vote of 22-8, with 6 Republican votes, a strong bipartisan bill to be hashed out here on the floor. And what happened? It was blocked. Again, a small number of the other party came and objected and blocked the passage of that bill, a bill that would put Americans to work and strengthen our infrastructure and help support the housing recovery, a bill that would have moved us forward. Despite every attempt to fund this government through what we call here regular order, the budget process and the appropriations process, we, even after that, came to the table ready to compromise on this continuing resolution. The Senate budget calls for a top-line spending number of $1.058 trillion. a balanced approach that reduces federal spending in some areas, raises revenue in others, and makes progress by replacing the sequester. That's the budget that we passed in the Senate, and it would call for spending $1.058 trillion. The House budget instead calls for $988 billion. And as you've heard our leader, Senator Harry Reid, say on the floor this week, he compromised. He agreed to a short-term funding bill at $988 billion, a $70 billion cut for this fiscal year, a major and painful concession for Democrats, particularly those of us on the Budget Committee who had not voted for a $988 billion number. We've already slashed spending. People are already suffering through the sequester, another thing that was enacted due to comparable tactics the last time there was a near default in 2011. The sequester has resulted in across-the-board spending cuts that have been dangerous and painful, and about which I've spoken on this floor repeatedly, reading letters from Delawareans like the Master Sergeant who have commented on how it is not the smart way to make cuts, it is an across-the-board way, an irresponsible way to make cuts. That same Air Force Base, Dover Air Force Base, suffered furloughs for hundreds of airmen and their families because of the sequester cuts. We had worked out a budget that would have replaced it and would have avoided those sequester cuts in a balanced and responsible way. But instead, in order to compromise, our majority leader agreed to a $70 billion cut for this fiscal year. It was tough for a lot of Democrats to swallow. So frankly, when I see House Republican leaders go on TV and say, Democrats won't negotiate, Democrats won't compromise, I have to say, that's not the case. That's not the facts I have before me. We have compromised. We have negotiated. And in fact, we have tried for months on this floor, more than 6 months, to get to compromise, to get to negotiation, to move this thing forward. Instead, we find when we give an inch, they take a yard. And today, there are some in the other party, suggesting that if they aren't granted a great big wish list, they'll force us to default on our country's sovereign debt. Mr. President, we keep hearing from the other side about the need to compromise and negotiate. I couldn't agree more. The whole way this body is supposed to work is by following the rules, following the process, going to conference, negotiating, and achieving a responsible result. We have repeatedly solicited Republican input, accepted Republican amendments, and made painful compromises. Now my message is simple. We should be following the rules. We should be following the process of this body. We should turn on the lights, we should pay our bills, and I would be happy, honored, to continue working with Republican colleagues to find real solutions to our fiscal problems the way we're supposed to, in a conference, negotiating over the budget that was passed here more than 6 months ago. So, to the colleagues who I share this chamber with, but with whom we have some differences over why this government is shut down today, I hope you'll listen to Master Sergeant DeLuzio and his family, and to the thousands and thousands of other Americans who are writing in and calling into our offices. They deserve better. This country deserves better. We need to show that we can be the model of democracy that achieves responsible, principled compromise. To my colleagues and my friends in the other party, stop blocking progress. Let's go to conference on the budget. Let's negotiate. But first, let's get our folks back to work. Let's get the government open, and let's move forward in a way that honors the best of our traditions and our rules.